We tell ourselves stories to make sense of the world. It's just what we do. But what happens when those stories go wrong? What happens when they create monsters where there aren't any? Today, we're going to dive into this really powerful tale about how societies can build their own demons, and more importantly, how they can unmake them. And really, this is the question that's at the heart of this whole thing. It's a challenge, right? It's asking us to look past the scary stories we're told and to go searching for the human truth that's so often hiding just beneath the surface. So to really get the answer, we have to go back, way back, to these isolated mountain villages in a place called Verdant, Vale. For centuries, a story was told here, a story that was really born from the darkness of long, cold winters and a deep fear of the unknown.
And this was it. This was the simple, brutal myth that fueled generations of hate. It was just this clear-cut verdict with a deadly sentence. No room for questions, and definitely no room for compassion.
You have to understand, this fear wasn't just some vague feeling. No, it was based on this collection of terrifying, totally unexplained events. People would just vanish into the woods, and if they came back, they'd be wild-eyed and confused. The community needed an explanation, any explanation. And so, they created a monster. So that was the story they told themselves, generation after generation. It was a story that made them feel justified in their fear and in their violence. But the truth, well, the truth was something else entirely. It wasn't rooted in demons or curses. It was rooted in simple human biology. And for the villagers, you can kind of see why these supernatural explanations made a terrifying kind of sense. It gave them a clear enemy. A simple answer to something they just couldn't possibly comprehend with the knowledge they had at the time. Because the reality was a medical condition, a rare genetic trait that was passed down through the generations of families who lived way up in those isolated high valleys. So what the villagers saw as some monstrous transformation was actually just a part of their neighbor's humanity. And this is where the real tragedy of it all lies. Every single monstrous thing about them had a logical human explanation. Their so-called superhuman strength? Well, that was just the result of generations of people adapting to life in the mountains. The madness they saw under the full moon? It was likely just a circadian rhythm tied to lunar cycles. The curse was never a curse. It was just a condition, seen through the really distorting lens of fear.
So you can see how this terrible cycle of fear and persecution just would have continued forever, right? But it didn't. And that's because one person had the courage to decide that enough was enough.
Instead of just accepting the shame and the fear that her people had lived with for centuries, Kyle decided she was going to confront the myth head-on. She was tired of the hiding, tired of the shame, and so tired of seeing her people die for somebody else's ignorance. I mean, can you even imagine the sheer, terrifying courage this took? She walked into the village, in broad daylight, fully visible for everyone to see, and she spoke her truth. She wasn't asking for pity, she was demanding to be seen. Not as a monster, but as a human being with a purpose. Her courage was the spark, absolutely. But it was a brutal winter storm that would become the real test, the event that finally forged a new understanding between the two communities. So picture this, an unprecedented blizzard hits, cutting the villages off from everything. All supplies are gone, they're trapped, they're desperate, they're starting to starve. Their entire worldview, their whole mythology, was about to be shattered by cold, hard reality. And guess who became their saviors? The very people they had hunted. All those traits that were supposedly part of a curse were actually a set of adaptations perfectly suited for that harsh mountain environment. They could move through the deep snow like it was nothing. Their heightened senses let them find food where the villagers couldn't. They used their unique abilities not to harm, but to help, to provide, and ultimately to save them all. But look, this wasn't an overnight change, not even close. It took generations to unlearn all that old fear. Trust had to be built, one story at a time, one shared meal, one act of kindness, until a brand new mythology, one based on truth, could finally take root. And the outcome of this long, hard transformation, well, it reveals the most profound takeaway from this entire story. And here's the thing that's just so powerful. The people themselves didn't change at all, not one bit. The only thing that changed was the story told about them. The exact same traits that were once a death sentence became a mark of honor, a protector's strength, a connection to nature. It was all there before, just completely misinterpreted. But the story is also honest. It reminds us that this work is hard. And it comes at a real cost. Kale herself lost her family to the hunt. She could have chosen revenge, but she didn't. Instead, she dedicated her life to building schools, to making sure that understanding, not fear, would be what guided the next generation. And that right there, that brings us to the question the story is really posing to us. It goes way beyond this fictional village and asks us to look at our own world, at our own history, at the stories we tell about people who are different. How often do we let fear write the story?
Because, in the end, the most powerful force for change here wasn't any kind of magic. It wasn't a curse being lifted. It was the simple, profound, and absolutely earth-shattering courage of a person demanding to be seen for who they truly are. And the only question left for us is, are we brave enough to really look?